Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Serene Reddy John, Chair of the Student Board.
I'm Shruti Ramdas, Secretary General of the CAIU Student Board.
It gives us great pleasure to welcome you this evening to CAIU, celebrating Academic Integrity Campaign 2022 as we celebrate the second anniversary of the Center. Here's a look for the agenda tonight. Okay, so at 3 p.m., which is now, we have the Leaders Forum. At 4 p.m., we have the Integrity Debate Championship Awards. And at 4:30, we have networking, tea, and photo session.
Now for some housekeeping rules. In order to ensure safety for all attendees, please see the below guidelines as per Ministry of Education mandate for on-site events. Social distancing to be practiced. Hand sanitizing stations are available throughout the area and venue. We are recording attendees, participants, and staff in case contact tracing is needed. Our assigned health and safety personnel is Dr. Zeenat Raza Khan, founding president of CAIU, who will monitor and implement the HSE guidelines and protocols. Finally, please do take note of the fire exits in case of an emergency. First up this evening, we'll begin with the Leaders Forum. The theme for the forum is K-12 and Integrity Conversations.
Our speakers for the forum are Ms. Lalita Suresh, Principal of GEMS Arun Indian School, Al Quds, Dubai. Ma'am, we welcome you.
Ms. Rema Menon, Director, Counselling Point. Ma'am, please welcome to the stage.
Mr. Zachary Smith, Acting Head of Curriculum Development and Planning, Department, Ministry of Education, UAE. Sir, kindly come to the stage.
Dr. Afnan, Assistant Professor, teaching courses in the Master of Educational Studies at the University of Wollongong, Dubai. Doctor, please come to the stage.
Our very own Nuha Manal Patani, student of GEMS New Millennium School, an active committee member at the center. Nuha, please come.
Finally, Ms. Joyce Priya, who is an advisory board member of our center and heading the Office of Institutional Research at UOWD. Ms. Joyce is also moderating this session today. Welcome, ma'am, to the stage, and over to you.
All right, so before we start with the panelists, I'm just going to ask the audience here a question. So what we are looking at the topic today is academic integrity and, especially how early should we start looking into these matters. And I think this has been a topic for a couple of years now, and I can see that many of the schools have started really integrating academic integrity within the curriculum. And as the years go by, I can actually see it coming to younger and younger students. Just out of curiosity, when was the time, this is for the students out there first, when was the time you first heard of the terms related to academic integrity like plagiarism? Anyone can tell me? Yeah? Which class? Around which class or age? Any of the older kids, did it come much later for any of you? The ones in year 12, 13, or even university? Did you also start knowing these terms around the years of 6, 7? So when did you guys hear of it first? In university. And for the older people out here, when did you hear first about plagiarism, not copy-pasting as is? When we started teaching. Around university, I think the first time we all did our assignments, we were told, yes, you need to reference. I never knew about in-text citations, about giving, credit for others' work. There's, at the end you have references and the whole list of websites or books that you refer to. And anyone here, the younger ones, do you know about self-plagiarism? and self-citing, like citing your own work? No? Well, I'm glad, because I think the first time I heard of self-plagiarism is probably in my early 20s. So that's how old I was when all these terms started coming into play. When I was doing my second degree, that's when it's like, you're not referencing properly. I lost marks, penalized. I once referred to an article I wrote myself, so I didn't say, okay, this is something that I did. I on my own did it. Why would I need to refer it? The faculty came back saying, this is self-plagiarism. I said, but I did the work, I did the research, I did it. And the exact quote or exact statement that was there, it wasn't referenced from anywhere. It's my work. And I was told, you still plagiarized, you're losing marks for that. So and it felt very weird when I had to cite myself in a work that I was doing. So if you haven't heard about self-plagiarism or citing your own work, now you know where you have heard it. All right, I'm going to now start with the panelists. I mean, we have a very diverse group here. We have someone from the higher education industry. We have a school principal who's dealing with K-12. We have Zachary, who is from the Ministry of Education and who is in charge of, looking at the curriculum and everything. We have Miss Rema Menon, who's been counseling countless number of students over the years. Yeah, and we have a student here who will tell us her perspective of what's been happening as well. So you're going to hear from a very diverse view, and it's going to be very interesting. So let's start with Ms. Lalita. According to you, what do you think is the right time to start discussions on academic integrity? I mean, would it be your high school students, your senior students, the middle, or would you even go as early as primary students?
I think as a school leader, I would first start with integrity, not just academic integrity, just with integrity. And that needs to start right from the child is born, I think, and it starts from right parenting and then the right kind of questions that you ask at school to differentiate between good and bad, to differentiate between right and wrong. And there are loads of, temptations and vices that exist all around us. And how do children use their own discretion in order to choose the right and the wrong? So this is very, very important that we begin talking to them about integrity and what does integrity mean at that level of, let's say, a kindergartner who is just 4 years old. It means compassion, doing the right thing, being helpful, being compassionate. And these are the qualities, or rather I would say, synonyms of integrity, I would say. But that's where it begins to develop. And then from there, we need to start talking about academic integrity. And the last couple of years when COVID came, we actually saw what academic integrity was, isn't it? It threw all assessments out of the door. It changed the way educators looked at systems. So we as educators need to now change the way we assess our children as well, because that's where we ask, the kind of exams that we conducted during COVID enabled them to lose their academic integrity. So do we blame them for it? No. We as educators failed in setting the right type of assessments, right? So we got a huge lesson to learn. Your first question was, what do you understand by academic integrity and when did you first hear? I heard the term academic integrity when I was probably in my 30s and I was doing my second master's. And that was the first time I had this question on, the whole concept of academic integrity and plagiarism and things like that. Before that, nobody talked to me about it. So I think children need to be taught right from the beginning that when you copy somebody's work or when you quote somebody, you need to reference. You need to say who has done it. In the same way, somebody would reference you when they take your words. So it's very, very important for us to teach integrity and then go on to teaching academic integrity.
So how do you see it being integrated within the curriculum? Do you see it as having an extra subject on it, or through discussions, through extracurricular activities,
No,
through workshops?
I think it needs to be a part and parcel of every teacher who is teaching them. It needs to be integrated the way we question our children. I think it needs to be inbuilt, integrated into all subjects. It cannot be a standalone subject. Can't be. It needs to be internalized by the child. It needs to be a part and parcel of you, your personality. And that's what we need to aim to develop in every child as an educator. So I think what we are currently doing after the COVID examinations and how I think we failed as educators in assessing our children is we're bringing in more and more of case studies and things like that. So children are forced to reference and kind of, it's not directly from the book or what is taught. They have to think, they have to research, they have to give credits to reference what they have chosen and write down their answers. So we have made that as a right from the lower classes, all classes do have case studies which enables to develop academic integrity.
So one of the things too when we're looking at education is that we see a lot of times we're teaching our children to be competitive, right? So it's all about you need to be number one. You need to have the best marks. And so unfortunately, if those are our driving motivations behind education, students are driven to cheat, right? Because you want to be number one. And a lot of times it doesn't matter how you get there. It's just you need to be there, right? That's how you show you're the best. And so now we're trying to move away from that, right? And so with 21st century skills, we're saying, no, collaboration. How are you working with your colleagues? How are you sharing the knowledge that you have and building the knowledge that your colleagues have in order to demonstrate something? And so I think a lot of times you're 100% correct. Like, what type of assessment are we giving our students? Are we giving them an assessment that shows end all be all? You're doing it individually. It's something that's very close-ended. You can easily measure it, multiple choice questions, which allows a student to cheat very easily, right? And it tells them that knowledge is closed, right? It's fixed. And so we're trying to move more towards a growth mindset, looking at you can gain knowledge, right? So maybe you do really bad on an assessment, that's okay. Like, that's showing us the knowledge you have now. Now let's put in effort, let's get better at it, right? And so we're trying to change how we talk to students about what learning looks like and what success looks like. And that's really important. And even as parents, the messages you send to your children are so important. Like, your kid comes home from school, usually, this is how I grew up. The first thing my parents asked me, what are your marks? What are your grades? You know, how are you compared to the other students, right? As parents, we know that we go into the classroom, we meet the teacher, the first thing we ask, where's my student in relation to other students? Instead of asking your child, what is a challenging task you took on today? What's something that you failed at? And that's okay. Like, failure is good. Failure is showing that you're going outside of your comfort zone to learn something. And I think fundamentally we need to change how we look at education and what we expect from our students. Because when we start to expect different things, you're going to start to see, instead of cheating, kids are going to start to work with each other, right? They're going to say, hey, it's not about the mark that I get, but it's rather about the process. Like, what did I learn from this? How did I learn from my colleague? How did I collaborate with other people? How did I use those resources that I'm finding on the internet, right? So it's great you're going out and doing research. Give credit. And I think, unfortunately, people, it's not that they're bad at heart, it's that the philosophy and what we're ingrained in that competition forces us to say, no, this is me. Like, I did this on my own. It's a very individualistic type of approach versus saying, no, like this is something we've done together, right? I'm building off of all these other people's work, right? I'm giving credit to them because I'm acknowledging that these people have done a great job. They've done a lot of hard work, and I'm adding to that hard work with my efforts. Yeah, sure. Okay.
I think ma'am exactly raises point. We need to celebrate mistakes and allow children to realize that it's okay to make mistakes. Everybody cannot learn everything. Some people learn better than the others, and that understanding needs to come from right from within. And that's where we as school leaders try to integrate that aspect into the school culture. It's a culture of the school. Again, it depends on whether the school is celebrating just academic excellence or is it celebrating endeavor as well.
I think it's also the schools to reward people I think it's also up to the schools to reward students who do the work on their own, because a couple of years back when my kids were in primary, the project that has been externally outsourced or done by parents gets the highest praise and the highest marks. My kid took a project that just fell apart when he was in school. I mean, I'm bad at arts and crafts as well. But, I mean, all I can do was sit there, brainstorm ideas with him and say, just do what you can. But then the embarrassment he felt when his project fell apart to the people whose parents, I mean, those were really good projects. No way a child of year 3 could have done it. And the way the parents had prepared the student to talk about it, no way. I mean, I can still tell you, my son, I was trying to prepare him. He refused to listen to anything I said. He did it on his own. I'm like, he's going to have to talk. And this was during the pandemic, so I was at home and I was able to watch him. I'm like, he's going to mess it because he did not prepare. He doesn't know what to talk. He just opened his mouth, and based on whatever he did, he just started talking about it. I was like, literally open-mouthed, and the teacher was appreciative. And then I have seen students who have really prepared the script, missed out one sentence, had to go back to 2-3 sentences and then repeat it again. But that project was much better done, and that student was awarded better. I mean, there is appreciation, but then if the reward goes to the child whose project is clearly done by a parent or outsider, schools have the responsibility to, reward them as well. The next question will be for Ms. Rema, because she's been counseling students. She's been counseling students through career advising, university choice. So from her perspective, what do you think are the impacts of not having these discussions? So you would have faced students in the past who have no idea about these things, and now you're facing students who have quite a bit of ideas. So do you see that these conversations do have an impact on the well-being and the career progression of the students?
One of the first things I'd like to say is thank you. This is a very important conversation, and I wish more students were here, just as parents, because the more we speak about it and the more we create awareness, the better prepared our youth will be. I've had students go to the outside world having done everything through Wikipedia and Google, and then have a nasty shock when they go into university, and all of their efforts go to vain because it's all just cut and paste. And there have also been instances where students were penalized because they shared their work with the others. They were equally penalized, as in the person who copied was also given a 0, and the person who shared was also marked a 0. So I feel that the sooner we introduce these things, the better for students, the better. And this word ethics, I think it's really, really important. Whether it is in life or in the professional life or personal life, academic integrity is all pervasive. I'll tell you one simple example. So many times we get forwards, right? We get forwards on internet, we get forwards on WhatsApp and on, Facebook. Many times there is a source, but have you seen there are several people who will just cut off that little bit of news of who was it who actually said that, or which was the website that actually sourced that information, and post it as though that was the person who has actually written that. I feel that's so wrong. It's so dismissive of that person who has taken the effort to put together that piece of information. I try never to do that, and if I do know the source, I quote the source, and if I don't, I also say that. I'm saying that today because it was a non-political post, but it was the first speech made by the Prime Minister of UK, and he talked about family values, he talked about so many things about hard work and integrity and how his vision, okay? And I posted that saying source not known, but all I'm saying is I don't know whether, I'm not talking about his Indian heritage or anything, but I really like the speech, and that I posted. You will not believe it, but on LinkedIn I have today, in my life I haven't had such a big response. 14,694 people have read it, seen it, and more than 38 people have reshared it. You know, when somebody I don't know the person, I don't know what he will set out to do, but what he meant in that speech appealed to me. That speech resonated with me. So where it starts is from the school, from the home. This thing called integrity begins right at home. When the first question asked was, when did you come across this term? So I went years ago, I don't even remember when, I went to a university in the US, and there every student had to sign something called an honor code. I said, honor code? What the hell is that? Yeah, and that was that even if they had open book exams or they had, exams where there was no invigilator, everybody will honor the code, which is so acceptable in that environment. I wish our schools and our universities introduce that. Maybe Zeenath, as something that you have advocated, you could have introduced the academic integrity honor code in this university, and it would be a start, because I'm telling you, nowhere in the UAE has that come into effect. And I feel that simple things can make huge differences. And I see it every day of my life, where we make a small tweak to the way we do things, and the ripples are many. So to answer your question as to how it impacts in the long term, even all parents here, the first places you worked with, the first inspirational leaders who were mentors to you, if you've been in a place which was very inspiring, you imbibe that culture. You imbibe the best of that place, right? Right? And if it has been a toxic environment, oh no, thank you very much, right? But so many times we are forced to stay there because of family commitments or whatever it is, or we are linked to that visa. So whatever it is, if we are really, really true to our ethics, be it in academic arena or personal arena, we will continue to be doing what is best for the community and for ourselves.
Yep. And in the long run, So in the long run, kids, if you see it as well, I mean, just imagine you're going to learn engineering. You passed the whole course by copying off your friend, doing assignments with your friend. You go and, into the workplace. Do you think you're going to be successful? They see your marks, everything, they hire you. But it stops over there. Because you're not able to carry out, you will find that you have to spend more time studying, and that actually halts or impedes on your career progress. So it's always a very short-term win. It gets you the marks then and there, but then lifelong, it's not going to help you. And I think Ms. Rama has said that, in a very beautiful way, that don't look at it in the short term, look at it in the long term and how it's going to help you. It might not be 2 years later, it might not be 3 years later, but definitely it's going to help you 10, 15 years later. Now, we come to Zach, and because he's involved in designing of curriculum for K-12 in the Ministry of Education, we will ask Zach to share his perspective on how he thinks it's, the struggles of integrating, academic integrating into the K-12 curriculum. We all know the struggles of teachers in trying to finish the curriculum and trying to mark the various notebooks and the assessments. So how do you think that's going to happen?
Well, first I'd just like to say thank you for bringing me back down memory lane. At university, signing the honor codes, and we would have to write pledged at the end of every paper. Oh, okay, yes. At the end of every paper to ensure our academic integrity, which in a lot of ways seems like a small thing, but it was something that always made you pause and think, did I do this by myself? Is this, and obviously the consequences for not doing it were quite dire. So thank you for that. I haven't thought about that for a very long time. For the curriculum, I think that as curriculum specialists, so often when it comes to concepts like academic integrity, we don't really imbibe it into what we're doing. Because we think, oh, well, that's a teacher or that's the administration. This is something that, it's outside the bounds of what a curriculum framework is, what the curriculum is. And I think that, fortunately, that attitude is changing because within the curriculum itself, we do have the power to be able to bring these concepts, bring things like referencing and sourcing and synthesizing information into it. I know that one of the things that we worked on, now specifically I work in the humanities and languages and even more specifically in the English curriculum. And one of the things that we've been stressing in our curriculum framework and even including it as learning outcomes is the skill of reading a text and summarizing a text, or reading a text and referencing who wrote that text and summarizing it. So these are things that we don't always think about, but we certainly have the ability to put them into our curriculum framework and to actually make them an integral part of what we're doing. Now, and of course, that doesn't just apply to English or humanities. This is something we can apply across the board. So when it comes to designing, I think this is something that we have to really keep in mind because it's such an important aspect. I think, as everybody's mentioned so far, it's not just academic integrity, it's integrity in yourself, it's integrity for what you do going forward, and it's the ability to actually apply what you've learned going forward. Now, I think the complexity you mentioned, Joyce, when we have 5 classes a week of 45 minutes, and we all know that the reality is that those 45 minutes are probably closer to 25 minutes, 30 minutes. How exactly do you take important things like academic integrity and actually teach that? And I think, as people mentioned, it can't be seen as a separate subject. It can't be seen as a separate discipline. It has to be incorporated into what you're doing, whether that be, ensuring that there's a project that's collaborative, doing research, but making that part of what actually you're expected to cover that day or cover that week, or even as the assessment for that month. So we have the ability to incorporate that, to make it so it's not that separate. The teacher doesn't need to take 20 minutes out of the day or 10 minutes out of the day to remind students how to reference. That should be built into the curriculum as part of, again, from the English perspective, as part of a writing task, as part of a research task, a research project. So I think we have that ability to incorporate that not just into our curriculum framework, but also into the actual curriculum, to the contents, to the learning, the instructional planners, schemes of work, what we actually want produced in the field. So I think that it's something that we, as I mentioned, we have to ensure as curriculum specialists, we are cognizant of this, and we're aware of how we can integrate and how we can support teachers, administration, by making sure that's an essential part of what the curriculum framework is.
That's really good. Now, Dr. Afnan has spoken a lot about the assessment, the design of assessments, and how we assess students. And this is a very hot topic in universities as well. So we don't just discuss on the innovative teaching deliveries, how to facilitate a student-centered learning, but we also spend a lot of time discussing on assessments, the design of assessments, the amount of formative and summative assessments there has to be. And if you see most of our postgrad programs, and especially in the humanities area from where Dr. Afnan comes from, we've moved away from final exams. It's all project-based, and it's a lot of self-reflection. So the assessments are based on your personal experience or the area of your workplace. So that's authentic assessments. And, academic integrity plays a lot because you're supposed to be able to prove that the students not only understood, but they're able to produce work of their own as well. And I know the schools have also moved towards a lot of project-based learning and research-based learning and a lot of group work. I mean, I've heard a lot of students, especially in schools, say, why group work, why teamwork? My team member is not contributing. What do I do? How do I do this? And I'm like, this is going to continue with you in your workplace as well. You will have 40, 50-year-olds and you will still have the same problem. So, Dr. Afnan.
Can I add just one thing to that? So there's actually a study conducted by Buckner and Hodges, and they conducted the study here in the MENA region. So it was in Morocco on the BAC exam that they take at the end, and in Jordan on the Tawjihi exam. And so these are very high stakes exams, right? So these exams literally determine your future, right? How well you do determines what university you'll get into, what major you're able to major in, therefore what career you can go into. And what they found is the students love to cheat. But what's ironic is that the students are using 21st century skills to cheat. So they're so creative and innovative, and they're collaborating, and they're using technology. And so what they're arguing is saying, why are we giving them these exams? Like, these exams are not the right assessment of their learning, of their skills, of their mindsets. And so it's so unfortunate to see that, because the MENA region, as you know, traditionally from a religious background, is conservative in those matters, right? At home, we're teaching our kids honesty and integrity, and these things are coming from home, but yet parents are still supporting their students cheating because they know there's so much at stake, right? Their future is at stake. And so what they were arguing is the same thing that Joyce is saying, like, let's move away from these high stakes exams to ensure that students are actually demonstrating their learning. It's there. Like, they have the 21st century skills, they're just using it the wrong way.
Yeah. So, Dr. Afnan.
Can I just add on over here? We've introduced project-based learning right from kindergarten to the senior classes. And we have two sets of parents. One set of parents who would say absolutely great things about project-based learning, and the other set of parents who would say it's a waste of time. What is my child doing sitting and talking? And they collaborate through Teams or through Zoom. And how do I know they're actually collaborating? They're into other sites and, doing different things or playing games for that matter. So the parents need to be educated first. I think that's where your major issue is. Parents need to be educated and then come down to children. But as Dr. Reza just said, that we need to really get to the bottom of it and cleanse the system. It's a mindset change, and that needs to happen.
I just wanted to add one more thing. So I work with a lot of students who are applying to university. And many times they have to write personal statements, they have to write essays. Those of you who are in senior classes, you will know that you need to do this, the moment you finish your year 13, you have to do all of that. Now, there are some parents who have sought my professional assistance or guidance or whatever you want to call it for assisting their children with the application process. Many times, they expect me to write the essays, and I do not. I now have made it a policy to state at the very beginning that I will brainstorm with your child, I will critique your child's work, I may even share some works done by other children, but I'm not going to be writing from scratch. Just not possible. Because I'm not going to be accompanying your child to university. Right? So
Hopefully not.
But, when money is involved, people think when they have paid for a service, they feel this is also, but many times, because I made it very clear right at the very beginning, they are able to understand. But if I haven't made it a blanket rule, they will expect me to do it.
Well, no, I thought that was very, very well said. I think I was just going to add a point that I think Ms. Lalita had mentioned earlier, and kind of build upon when it comes to, let's say, flushing and cleansing the system. I think that we focus on students, we focus on parents, and not that I want everything to change per se, but I do think that, especially in the public education sphere where I mostly have worked, in the cultural in the UAE context, you also have the inspectorate, you have the administration, the pressure on the principals themselves. Well, students want to get that high grade, parents just want the high grade. Schools also are looking, we want to be that top-ranked school. And sometimes, it's, well, we're not always going to do all of our due diligence when it comes to enforcing things like academic integrity, because we know that we want a higher grade. That we want that higher rank, and we want to be the best school. And it doesn't look great if all your it looks wonderful when all your students have 100% across the board, which we know. Yeah, that's not always a realistic scenario, let's say. So I think that there's that mindset as well, and it's not just a UA context. I know this is in most areas of the world, whereas it's not just the parents and students who have that pressure, but it's also the schools. So looking at ways from an administrative side, from an educational system side, how to try to make it easier for there to be more flexibility when it comes to the way things are administered, the way things are scored, so that these administration, the system doesn't feel like it always has to be the best, and we're going to ensure that no matter what. So yeah, I think there's just that point where it's the top down. We really have to think about what we're doing and how we're making this work.
Dr. Khan, you spoke about academic integrity, 21st century. And I'd be interested, so I spoke at a conference in Tbilisi earlier this week, and then I was in Cairo the other day. Where do you see the future of that 21st century when it comes to artificial intelligence? Right? Because I think that's the next level, right? So I have many gray hairs, so when we were cheating in school, it was copying from the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? But you move on, but I think, there's that next phase, and so where do you see that, and where do we as both academic instructors but students think about that? Because, AI is already making its way into the work world, which means at some point it'll make its way into the academic world. So would love your thoughts.
Thank you. So that is definitely not my field. I'm like you, humanities. But I teach a research methods class here at the university, and one of my students, that's her topic. So she's looking at AI and art, and looking at how AI now is creating art. And so she's looking at actually through that lens of an integrity perspective of how do you then give credit, right? So they're building off of all these different artists, right? And this whatever is there, they're taking and putting it together. But definitely where I see it going, and I don't even know, this might even be happening now, where students are using these technologies to write their papers, right? Yeah, it's already happening. It's already happening. So they're submitting papers that you know for sure this student did not write, right? It's coming from who knows where. Right. Yeah, I know, like I can talk to you and I know that this is not your work, right? And so for me I teach teachers, right? And so what we're looking at is like, how do we prepare teachers to engage in this new world, right? And so a lot of times teachers, kids think we're dumb. They still think we're dumb, okay? And so I think back in the day, right, kids would turn in material that's not theirs, 100% plagiarized, and they think they're gonna get away with it because for some reason we don't have brains, right? Now we have turned it in, right? So the paper comes in, right away it highlights, tells me the source, it's all there for me, right? So it's very easy for me to look back. Now with AI, who knows what, like I think we just have to keep keeping up with the technology and what's coming out. But for me, what I'm most interested in, how do we teach students to engage with this new technology, right? Because we want them to be creators. We want them to go out into the fields and build upon what other people have built upon, but give credit at the same time. And so that's the hard part. Because even if you look at the industry, unfortunately, a lot of times the stories of like Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, integrity isn't happening there, right? And so they're seeing these success stories and they're saying, well, look where they made it. Right? So why not? Why not steal from someone else when this is what success looks like? And so I think a lot of times what we need to change is what we tell our students success is, right? Is it money? Is it, these multi-billion-dollar companies, or is it something more than that? But I wish AI was my field because it is very interesting. It is, for sure, 100%. 100%. Yes. Yeah, please. Oh, yes.
Yeah. But then with the AI in art, I mean, what I've heard from one of the artists is pretty soon the human artist is going to be like the equivalent of organic. So they're going to be more expensive. So they're going to, start reinventing themselves as organic artists. Yeah. Yes. No, I have actually seen the clip where the AI has drawn, and it's really it's amazing the way it's done. Yeah.
I won't pretend like I'm an expert in AI, but I'm definitely like a nerd and I take computer science. And so I was thinking about this thing a lot, about how AI is going to affect how we think. And I think, we mentioned how AI would make it easier for students to cheat maybe, and it would make it harder for programs like Turnitin to detect that plagiarism and to detect that contribution of AI. But what I think is going to happen is that AI, as it gets smarter and smarter, and we haven't reached that point yet, but once we reach that point where AI becomes smarter and smarter, I think we as a human species are going to have to evolve and to become smarter ourselves and to become even smarter than the AI itself. And I think the main thing about critical thinking and the main thing that differentiates humans and that differentiates a computer system, I think that's going to become more and more defined as AI develops further. And GPT-3, like you mentioned, it can write essays on its own with just a couple of prompts. But then what differentiates that from a human work, I think that's going to become clearer and clearer as AI becomes smarter and AI becomes better at impersonating human beings. I think we'll become better at becoming human beings, if that makes sense.
Just a last question for Dr. Afnan. Since you've been talking about the teacher training and everything, do you think that based on the current teacher training systems and everything, there needs to be changes made or, to sort of integrate the academic integrity with, preparing teachers to deal with these cases, or do you see that already well advanced stages?
No, that's a great question. So teaching is an ethical endeavor, right? I think that's one of the most difficult professions we have out there. And there's ethics at so many different levels, right? And so when we look at it, the first place I like to go is look at teacher education standards. So typically the UAE has standards for their teachers, Australia has standards, Singapore has standards, the US statewide, they have standards, right? In all of the teacher standards, there's always one related to ethics. So it's there. It's integrated very well into what we expect teachers to do. Sadly, when we look at teacher education programs and the curriculum, we don't teach it. We operate under this assumption that it's common sense, right? You should know this as a teacher. And sadly, a lot of times where it escalates is where we have really intense situations where there's relationships between a teacher and a student. Or like you mentioned, I think someone mentioned teachers helping students cheat to get, and it's at those higher levels, but yet that's when we all of a sudden realize, oh, we need to teach teachers about ethics. But it should be something that's ingrained, just like you were talking about the curriculum. It should be ingrained in the teacher education curriculum, right? Where they're learning about what is it. First, you need to define it. They need to understand all the different categories that fall under it, and then ensure that we're actually teaching them how to teach their students. But they themselves need to understand themselves as an ethical human being before they can then go teach that to their students.
Yep. And now finally, Nuha. You've all heard from educators, university level, ministry level, and school level. Now we are going to hear from a student. So you've been in the Center of Academic Integrity for a while. So how do you think that has helped you see a different picture? What challenges have you, do you think that it's for students? And basically, we just want to listen from a student perspective. So even the project-based learning, the research-based learning, and all the things that have been happening in school since the pandemic as well. It would be really nice to get a student's viewpoint on all this. And what you think is the way forward for us educators to help you better?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions, but I think if I want to start from the beginning and the fundamentals, like I resonate so much with you when you talked about the fundamentals and about the core reason of why we need to be academically integral. And the main thing is, I think I realized very late, and I think every student, how many students are in this room? Okay, I think I realized very late that I need to figure out the purpose of my life. And I realized very late that my education is built for that. I realized very late that the purpose of the education system is to help me figure out what the purpose of my life is. And I don't think our education system focuses on that anymore. I think it's become so convoluted, it's become so technical that it's lost that sense. It's lost that genuine authenticity of why it's there in the first place. And the education system, I think from the beginning, it's been created so that we can tell the younger, or not tell, we can train the younger generation to figure out what the purpose of their lives is. And I don't think it does that anymore. I think so much around me, I see students around, I see students around me think, the reason that students cheat, I think, is not because they're malicious or because they're competitive naturally. That's what I've seen around me. I've seen that they just don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They're in class and we're writing an exam. We don't know why we're learning that, and it hit me very late. Why do I have a passion for, let's say, science? Because I picked science. Why do I have a passion for science? And that hit me so late. I wondered, does it hit every student at all, or does it not? And we go into our careers and we go into our workplaces and universities, and we have no idea why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that's where it needs to start from. That the education system, it's such an important thing. I think it's the most important thing. That a teacher's job is like the most important thing. That they're guiding a student to figure out the purpose of their lives, and that's become so diluted in the years that it's just become about how much content you can grab, about how much you can memorize from a textbook, and that's how we students see it, unfortunately. At least from my curriculum perspective, I guess. There's just so much focus on the technical details, which I won't argue is very, very important, but then we haven't focused at all on our inner selves, and that's why, the Integrity Debate Championship, I love debate because when I started debating, it forced me to think critically. And when we as students, as teenagers, we're just growing up and we're just figuring ourselves out. And then we suddenly realize we don't know why we're doing it. obviously till like 8th grade, till middle school, you're okay, you're acing your exams, but then after that, it's like, why? What do I want to take in the future? What do I want to take at university? And why do I want to take it? And just that being, for so many people around me, so many of my friends around me, so many of my students around me, and I know for a lot of students, that's just not clear. And because of that, we go into things like cheating. We go into things like, not synthesizing our own information, not creating our own things. And I realized that when I started debating, and I was forced to create my own information. How do I say? When I was forced to think, and when I was forced to put out genuinely what I thought, and without looking at anyone else's work, without looking at what anyone else thinks. That is such a skill that is suppressed in schools today. That is such a skill that I feel like we're all rusty with, and we need to train ourselves to think critically first. And I think once we learn to start thinking critically, that's when we can expect students to produce information of their own. And yeah, I'll just.
Yeah, we are opening questions to the audience.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So my question is, when we talk about academic integrity, it's usually around students, how we monitor students. My question to you is, who is monitoring the system? How do you know that an assignment given in has been actually checked by a teacher to make sure that it's not just on the student, it goes beyond. And we know for a fact that teachers do lag behind. And I've not only seen this in higher school, I have a kid in KG1, KG2 as well, and sometimes we get home projects, which are supposed to be done by the kids. But when they come in, you can clearly tell, kid didn't do that, mom did or dad did or both. So I sometimes feel that yes, it's a huge part of today's education, but the system, who is checking the system? That's my question.
Just before I leave it, I think it's changing a bit because if you're seeing how the ministry in the UAE and everything is also working, there is a lot of emphasis now given to quality assurance and academic integrity. So at the university level, I can tell you that we have to continuously prove to the ministry or the quality assurance body within the ministry that we are monitoring this. There's these rounds of moderation. We have, let's say, samples. We do random checks of each subject to make sure that the marking is consistent, to make sure that the marking criteria is consistent, that each student is marked in the consistent way. We have learning outcomes for subjects. We do quality checks to ensure that the assignments and the final exam addresses those learning outcomes. And there's this huge exercise we have to do at the end to show the extent to which students have met the learning outcome. So it's not enough for us to say we have this much failure rate, we have this much of a pass rate. They're actually getting into the details of to what extent has your student. So we used to look at things, years back we used to look at things at an aggregate. So if we had a class of 100 students, we do an aggregate, but now it's getting back into individual level. It's very slow. I'm telling you, it's very slow because there's a lot of time and effort which educators don't have time to do. And it's going to probably take years for this to happen, but then the seed is there, so it's just a matter of taking it further. Anyone?
I think so. I mean, this is happening in schools as well. And definitely we are looking at endeavor and the progress made by children rather than just the attainment, because that's very, very important. Yeah, but then at the same time, I understand. You see, it's a vicious circle. It's a vicious circle. So at one point, you're educating children to be on their own and to be, be creative and to be authentic and everything. But finally, you have a board exam that completely defeats the whole purpose. And the university admissions are based on the results. So it's a very vicious circle. So that's why I totally feel that it needs to come from within, and everybody, parents, teachers, students, must take responsibility of their own academic integrity.
And I always say education industry is the slowest to change. So there's a lot of complexities. Before, one change can be made, it takes years. So the world is moving at a fast rate, but unfortunately, the education industry is still at a snail's pace.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So sometimes you mentioned that some people from the Ministry of Education come and randomly check teachers how they present their work, but sometimes teachers and students fake it. So when they see that some people from Ministry of Education comes, so they fake it.
Sorry, come again?
So yeah, some teachers and students fake it when they know that some instructors will come and check their the way of teaching.
You can't fake everything. Certain aspect of decorations do happen. I'm not denying that at all. But everything cannot be done because it has to be, they are much more smarter to look through those paraphernalia. Yeah? It's like when you have a guest at home, you do bring out your best crockery. Yeah? Is it fake? It's not fake. You just put up something. But at the same time, the ministry or whoever comes to measure it, they go much deeper than the external look of it. They go into much more details of individual child, individual progress, catering to the needs of every child. So that cannot be faked at all.
So there's a lot of background. We show them the decoration, they start scratching the surface.
Yes.
So there's a lot of paperwork and evidence we need to provide. So they're not just going to be talking to the teachers or the principal. They talk to a lot of people. They talk to the stakeholders. The KHD inspection that happens, they talk to parents and students. So it's not just students. They talk to parents as well. And the same thing happens at the university level. They talk to students, they talk to faculty, they talk to administrators. And they're very quick to catch if they're not able to triangulate the information. So if I say something saying, yep, this is what's happening, we have this policy, we are doing this, we are implementing this. They talk to the teacher and she probably would have said 80% of what I have said and said, not sure about the others. They go to the students, we didn't know, we haven't seen this. Then they know.
It's very easy to find out. I have been inspecting schools and it's very easy as an inspector to identify what is fake and what is real.
Okay, 2 questions. Just 2 questions, yeah.
Mine is actually more of a point instead of a question. I would like to point out the point you said about that it's like to change something in the educational industry, it's very slow or very hard to happen. And I, as an 11th grader, I agree. And I study in an American curriculum school. So basically, sometimes it's just weird that a generalized test, it would specify just a student's ability or a student's memory in life in general. And as Dr. Afnan mentioned that you could do a test, and this test, it doesn't measure your personal abilities, it measures whatever you learned, and this could, it could stop you from entering a specific university you would like to go to. Yeah, so it's basically just that I agree with your point. And sometimes, let's say, we call ourselves Generation Z. And for example, for Generation X and Y, they have a specific mindset that, let's say, our children should be number 1 in school, they should get the highest marks and highest grades. You can't change this in them. So I would actually be so happy if more people like you guys, to be honest, had elaborated more on this topic for this thing to change. And for us as a younger generation who would raise our children in the future, that it's not a competitive environment, whereas you should just be educated in the place you're in. Thank you.
No, I agree with you because I'm not a very strong believer in standardized tests because that just teaches students to train. Because you have your marking criteria, you have your questions, and they train on past papers of 10, 15 years. It doesn't bring out the 21st century skills that we are trying to embed in you as well as to critical thinking and problem solving. But like, Ms. Lalita said, it's a vicious cycle, so let's just hope for the best. Final question.
Yes. Okay. So, just what I've gathered from the discussion,
education in and of itself is just preparation for the future, right? Essentially, preparing oneself for the future. So I want to know that right now our education is purely academic and it's very assignment-based, very research-based. But the skills that are actually integral for us in the future are skills like financial. We need to be financially independent. That I know it is stuff that we can learn on our own, but most people are not even aware of the importance of it. So from an educator's point of view, how important do you think financial education is? And shouldn't it be made a part of everyone's curriculum?
I think financial education is a part of curriculum. I think at least in my school, we do financial literacy right from grade 4. It's a part and parcel. And we call external stakeholders, and there are a number of companies. In UAE, we are placed in such a position that we have loads of companies who want to do CSR in schools. And so we have all those bankers and financial companies who come and teach children, and there is a proper curriculum right from grade 4 up to grade 12. So it is a part that is looked at.
I'd like to add, it's not just financial, but life skills in itself, because finance is just one aspect. When you go into the workforce, when you go into the outside world, there are so many more skills that will prepare us, and oftentimes we are so focused on marks. I think marks don't really define you. You can become whoever you want if you believe in yourself and have, earlier there was a question, how many students in this audience? I was looking to see if there were hands raised from anybody here. I see myself as a lifelong learner. So I raised my hand because I feel that we all will be irrelevant unless we are open to change, unless we continue to learn. We will be dinosaurs, useful for nothing, right? Thank you very much.
You raise a really important point, and I know we've talked about how education is very slow to change, there's a lot of truth to that, but it's not impervious to it. It certainly does happen. So I think you're specifically saying very specific, looking at financial literacy, and I do know just from the ministry curriculum side, this is something that we've also identified as a very important aspect that needs to go across all subjects, all grades, and how to integrate it into every subject. So. Not that I'm going to announce a framework we're launching tomorrow, but I will just tell you that even though education does take a long time to change, things like that, those life skills, financial literacy, those are things that we are at least we are recognizing and we are incorporating and trying to get it. But I think thank you for raising it because it's a very important aspect of education. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think you bring up a really important point because Ms. Larita, she's saying, yes, it's there, right? And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, in schools, what is implicit, we don't make explicit. So you're probably learning it, right? It's sprinkled in there somewhere, but your teacher didn't do a really good job of identifying this for you and saying, hey, by the way, this is what you're learning at this moment. And so when I teach teachers, that's the number one thing I always try to instill in them. Make whatever is implicit explicit to your students. Like take the time, the same thing that you brought up, explain to your students why are you learning this, right? My daughter's in FS1, bless her heart, and I gave her 5 dirhams. She went to school and she had to make handicrafts and then buy with the 5 dirhams, right? That's financial literacy. My daughter came home, I'm like, what did you learn today? She was like, I got a bracelet. So I'm like, yeah, that's great, but let's have a conversation around that, right? And so let's talk about that. That's financial literacy. And so I sat down and explained to her, okay, like what did you do? Ask questions, that type of thing. And so as educators, it's so important. A lot of times in our minds, we think it's explicit. We have a plan, right? We have our learning outcomes. We understand how they match with our assessment, but we don't make that explicit to our students. We just kind of blindly lead them. And so I always say, like, whenever you're able to explain to your students what's the thinking behind the thinking, what's the thinking behind the planning. Let your students know that, like let them be a part of that process. So thank you for bringing that up because it's very important, right? Thank you.
All right, so that brings the end of our discussion. I hope you guys had a very, good perspective from our different panelists over here. And thank you so much for staying with us.
All right. We have a small token of appreciation from the center and the University of Wollongong. I would like to invite Dr. Haley. Oh, there, yes. Dr. Haley is the Director for Engineering at the University of Wollongong in Dubai. And he's here today to help us thank all of our panelists who've taken time out of their weekends to be here to talk to us about a very important topic. The reason we were insisting on the mics is because we are recording, we want to share it with the schools. That's why. Dr. Haley? Yeah. Come.
So, firstly, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming, and particularly to the panelists for volunteering your time and coming here and to speak to us all. We really appreciate this. As a university, we really like to support such initiatives that have an impact on future generations as well. But also at the same time, we are very interested in the area of integrity, and it reflects our values as an institution. The quality of what we deliver to our students revolves around the integrity and academic excellence. So thank you very much. Thank you for your center. Really appreciate your center being active here. We thank you so much.